Let alone with the campaign, you've got all the other stuff coming in, and it's work, home, campaign, let alone whatever else.
Right, yeah.
Just
It's crazy.
Yeah.
it's welcome to this world, I guess.
I know.
My daughter can traverse it like I'm sure yours can.
Oh
too.
my God, I'm so sick.
Like, it's ridiculous.
It's amazing.
Okay, guys.
Sorry, I'm gonna take all your time.
Sorry, man. It was a little, Gen X talk about phones, man. Come on, go on.
Oh, the dad jokes, and the dad jokes come out.
Oh,
Yeah, real. That's later.
Okay.
We're good to go. We're live.
We're ready?
Speed.
We're live? All right, cool. Well, welcome to the endorsement interview, Lamb Week. Let's just jump in.
Do you want to introduce this?
Yes.
House District 38.
Yeah.
We need both your ages.
54.
Okay.
As of October 17th.
Right,
So if you're
right.
about to turn, still
54. But good.
I'll be 43, but as of October 21st, I'll be 44. So 17.
Still 43 though.
Still 43, yes.
Still 43.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Cool.
Sorry, go on.
No, tell us about the district. I don't know,
Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about the district and why you're the right
Yeah.
person for the job.
I think first.
Let's start here.
Yeah, sure. Well, the district, House District 38 covers most, if not all, of Lake Oswego. There's a small sliver of Lake Oswego closest to I-5 that's not part of the district. It goes up north along Highway 43 on the west side of the Willamette River up to the Ross Island Bridge, which is the northernmost border of the district, and goes
Grabs that little
kind of
piece,
that.
right?
It's basically between I-5, Ross Island Bridge up north, and then the Willamette River to the east.
Yeah.
That sliver of land. So that includes, in the district includes, like I said, all Lake Oswego, but in the district also includes Portland Community College, Lucerne Flat College, and then South Waterfront District, Johns Landing. It also includes OHSU, some of the buildings on the lower campus, on the waterfront there.
You guys have a lot of assets there.
We do, and then we also got Lake Oswego School District, Riverdale School District, and then also Portland Public Schools is also in our district. So we've got a good mix of public schools. We've also got public community college. We've also got a university. We've also got a smattering of lots of different types of businesses too, in things that are related to OHSU, but also along the Macadam, a lot of businesses there.
Yeah.
Then we have the core of Lake Oswego.
So why are you the man for the job?
Well, I know the district. I know the people. The people know me 4 years ago when I ran for city councilor, and that was 2018. We ran a campaign. Basically, there were 7 candidates running, and that was something where we had to do door knocking. It wasn't just a primary where we just focused on people within our party. Because city council essentially is a nonpartisan seat, and so it required me to go to all the doors and knock on all the doors, regardless of party affiliation. It also required us to be in front of a lot of people. This was pre-COVID, so I think that during the city council race, we had probably half a dozen different public forums. We had one put on by the Chamber of Commerce, Respond to Racism. There was some other student groups that had these forums. We also had Lake Corp also did a forum. So it was a chance for us to meet everybody. And I think the way we ran our campaigns was, out of the 7 people that ran, we kept it so that sooner or later we're going to find out who our colleagues will be. And so it required us to maintain a decorum, required us to maintain civility during the campaign. I think that served us well. And it's been my role as city councilor. This will be my 4th year in that role. And I think when I started that role, I don't think everybody told us, hey, by the way, for the next 4 years, this is what it's going to look like. 2019, I started my first year on council, and then rolling into 2020, who would have thought we had a worldwide pandemic, and add to that the things we had to do as a city response. We typically meet twice a month, but during the pandemic, we were meeting twice weekly, emergency meetings, and so we're figuring out how do we react and look at the needs of our community. How do we support our students, support our families, support our small businesses that were in Lake Oswego. And so it required us to be constantly just reassessing every 2 days, every 3 days, to figure out how do we react to this pandemic and make sure that we're providing supports that we need for our communities. Later that year, we had the social justice movement, right? And I think that Lake Oswego has its fair share of difficulties there, and we've had to kind of wrestle with those issues as well, with regards to police accountability, with regards to things that we were, as a community, were grappling with. Add to that, later that year, the wildfires. It was a scary moment when city manager said, look, don't use lawn pools. If it starts a fire, you're on your own, because all of our resources were helping to fight the big fires down south in the Santan Valley or in southern Oregon. So having to think about that, and then thinking about the ice storms that came, right, and how vulnerable we are, because we have a wastewater, not a wastewater, but we have a water treatment plant that provides water for not only for Lake Oswego but also for Tiger too. And the message from City Hall was, don't panic yet. We've got 2 days worth of water. We're out of electricity. PG&E, we lost power along the entire Highway 43. If you remember, that was just, it was a war zone. But we were able to secure a generator to allow us to be able to provide clean water for our citizens. So we didn't have to make that announcement, hey, conserve. We were very close. So those
And you
are
were part of that?
was part of that.
Okay.
And so those are things where I think back on my experience, yeah, it was not something we planned, but those are things you learn on the job. And I think that as we look at the legislature, those are things that I'm going to be able to bring to the legislature. We talk about working together. City council, we all have different views. We don't agree on everything, but we also have to recognize that for the benefit of our community, our citizens live in Lake Oswego, we've got to set our differences aside and actually come to solutions, right? And more often than not, we come to unanimous decisions. We consider, as a council, my prior council with the prior administration and the current council, we all agree that when we have split decisions, those are not good decisions. That means we need more work done. And so when we have, when I'm looking forward to the legislature, is that if we have things are split down the party line, that means we haven't done our work enough. We've got to be able to get to that point where we build a consensus, and that's what I bring to the table.
I'm sorry, what did you say the breakdown was?
What's that?
The party breakdown on the council?
Well, it's nonpartisan.
Nonpartisan, but you know kind of who's...
Generally speaking, some of us are very much, very much more climate change, environmental justice leaning. Some of us are much more focused on the numbers and the dollars and cents, the more of the fiscal conservative. So,
but your point is you come together very often, and you try not to have those divisions.
Yeah, and those are things that requires us to be able to talk to each other and having dialogue, and that means that actually having civil conversations over coffee and say, hey, talk to me why you feel this way. And I think that we as a council go in with the mindset, look, this is how I feel now, but that's basically what I know now. Talk to me and see, find more information. I might change my mind, but I may just become more convinced that my position is correct. And that's something that I really want to be able to bring to the legislature, because I've done that in the past 4 years, and certainly the two administrations we've had with the leadership of Kent Studebaker and the leadership of Mayor Buck, they're very different people, and the council makeup is very different. When I joined on the council, I was the first person of color ever elected to the city council. I was also the youngest person on the city council, and I was also the only person that was really that was still maintaining a full-time job, but also raising 2 school-age kids at the same time. So those are things that I had to be able to bring that perspective to the decisions we're making, because just looking at our community.
Sure. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Great. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to come in. Really appreciate the opportunity to.
Do you go? Is it Alistair?
Alistair.
Alistair.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that the question you ask is a great question. One component of the district, though, is that it's basically the River Grove Elementary Catchment District that was swapped out this year. So it's in the district this year, but in redistricting was moved out in order to pick up the spot that includes OHSU, that little peninsula you talked about earlier. So that was a swap out. So that's new for this coming year. So a significant portion of Lake Oswego voters are no longer part of the district that typically represents Lake Oswego and parts of Southwest Portland.
Where'd they go? They went to.
They went to the district with Tigard.
Are they okay?
I'm sure they're they're just fine.
Okay.
However, and it's an interesting, confusing part when you're out walking, talking to voters. So, well, you're going to be,
because you're
no,
yeah.
you're not. I apologize. You're on this side.
Yeah.
What happened? Well, it's called redistricting. It's something that happens once every 10 years or so. In terms of why, would I be best to represent the district? I am not a politician. I had no desire ever to run for politics. It's about February where I really started to get interested when a Democratic caucus member in the Oregonian wrote an op-ed as to why he's leaving the Democratic caucus. And it was a very interesting op-ed. It was about the supermajority, and it was about what changed in the party, because it's not a nonpartisan, it is a very hyper-partisan world we live in right now. And his point was, I thought this would be great. We could ignore the opposition party and just do what we want to do. And what it turned out, according to him, is that they were walked in, a sheet of paper was put down and said, this is what you're going to say, this is how you're going to vote. And if you don't fall in line, you don't get these cush positions, we won't give you...
This is the editorial.
This is the editorial.
Who wrote that op-ed?
Sorry?
Who wrote the op-ed?
Oh, it was Representative, I've got it right here. I'm trying to remember his name, but it was really just turned me on in this space. His name was...
And this is what got you interested?
This is what got me interested, Marty Weil. It was very interesting. And so I think the reason why, and I've lived in the district for 12 years, so I know the district, but I think I represent the district because, like myself, these COVID years, folks have woken up. They've become awake in this time to why doesn't this work? After all the money, after all the time and everything that, whether it's the legislature, whether it's the governor's office, whether it's the treasurer's office, whatever it is, we're still not getting results. And so I started to look at, well, who's running in the area, and I was like, well, at least we've got somebody running. Mr. Nguyen decided to jump in, and then he wound up with a challenger, and we spoke right after you won this incredibly drawn out, my heart goes out overview. But that's when we spoke, and I said, this is just congratulations, right? 28 votes.
All right, you guys already win for civility.
Well, and so what was interesting about this is I then looked and realized, well, we're going to have a Democratic primary, and that's about 50% of the district. But once again, we're not going to have a challenger. So someone like myself, who's a Republican, someone who's an independent, who's the Green Party, who is non-affiliated, we don't have a choice in our representatives. So here I am watching, someone's got to run. And 30 minutes before the deadline, still no one was running. So I filled out the form and I hit enter.
Wow.
and with my wife, this is we always do things as a joint decision, and then told the 4 kids, right? And it was just like, and I think
Dad's gone crazy.
basically is what's happened here, and why are you doing this? And so for me, what's interesting is I am the product of public school education my whole life, right through graduate school. All 4 of my kids are in public school, went through the public schools. And we very much value public school education.
Happy to go to the same school?
I've never. I grew up in Oregon, right? But
kids, same school as your kids?
Same kids. Like
Grant High here. So
congratulations, it's wonderful. And I think there's a lot to public education. There's very valid reasons to not be in public school if that's your choice. But it's important to me that particularly we look for results and we look for accountability. And my background, I grew up in a union household. My mother worked for the city, not in Oregon. We were in New York, was in the library. My father was in construction, and I grew up right outside of New York City.
Where?
Westchester County.
Sure. White Plains?
Sleepy Hollow. So.
Oh, I know Sleepy Hollow.
There you go. So
yeah.
You obviously know the area.
Great town.
So there you are. Bedroom community in New York, but very diverse, and I didn't know any different. And coming out here, I've been very involved from a community perspective, and I was on the board right after moving out here of a group called Christie Care, which was based on the Merrillhurst campus. It was the original first nonprofit for Oregon and was focused on children. At first it was an orphanage, became all about children with mental health challenges. It merged with a national organization called Youth Villages. I became the board chair here in Oregon for several years, had to work through a lot of challenges working with OHA and just the system in general. We moved into foster care with the kids because they were being housed in motels and hotels and no one was taking accountability or responsibility. And then moved into kids aging out, so young adults aging out. And as I got to the end of that, in terms of being board chair, I joined the OMSI board. And so I just left the OMSI board at the end of May. I was treasurer for 3 years. I was board chair for 2 years through COVID and through a significant leadership transition. And throughout all the time, it's about bringing creative solutions and working with folks. From an OMSI perspective, we had to work through the COVID challenges, just like everybody else. We had to get through it. Mr. Wynn knows very well what that's about, having restaurants himself. And it's about those creative solutions and working with people to bring those solutions to fruition. Realizing we are in a hyper-partisan world in Salem. The best part, I think, about declaring to run is not only did the Democratic Party not know who I was, the Republican Party didn't know who I was either. I wasn't asked to run. I wasn't recruited to run. You can look at our endorsements. I have no one from the party on my endorsement.
Yeah, I noticed, yeah. And
it's just not there. I have the independent party endorsement. So now the endorsement, I am their nominee. So went through the process of getting the independent party of Oregon. I'm one of 5 Republicans they've chosen to endorse me. So all of this.
So why are you a Republican?
I am a Republican growing up in New York. We had, Governor Rockefeller. We had, at the time, Ronald Reagan played very big, and you had all the Reagan Democrats come over. As I said, I was in a union household. And it just, to me, was, hey, you know what, I'm a Republican. And New York Republicans, at least then, were fairly liberal Republicans, right? And which is why they're called Rockefeller Republicans, right? And so that just stuck with me. We moved across 6 different states. And the party went from one side of me to the other side of me to the other side of me on this side. And it's just been who I am.
But you're comfortable there.
I am comfortable there because I know who I am.
Okay.
And I know the party, Mr. Wynn will know his party moves as well in different spaces.
Do you believe that Joe Biden won the 2020
I believe that any politician that has been in office or is in office has officially won their election. So yes.
Okay.
But I want to be blanket and very clear about that. If you are certified as the winner, you are the winner of your election. You're not worried
about, you don't buy the whole election fraud?
We have a president. He is my president, and he is in office.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what else there is to say about that. So, in that space.
Gut checking.
Absolutely. And we can put some more. I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-gun safety. We can add others to space as well. Which all of this brings me back to why I believe I'm most suited to represent the district. As I'm out speaking with folks from all walks, I have Republicans who support me, I have Republicans who don't. I have independents who support me. I have Democrats who support me. Because we're not talking party. Because I don't care about the party labels. We're talking about the frustrations people have with the unsheltered homeless who aren't getting what they need. They're living in squalor. They're susceptible to crime. The crime themselves. I had a call on Saturday from a woman in the district who said, I just need to tell you about all the property crime that's happening with me. You talk about the education challenges. My children are impacted by the public school education challenges. I've seen it. I understand what's happening. We're not going anywhere. We are fully vested in public school education. But it's challenged. We have problems we need to fix. And from a business environment perspective, Oregon has gone from being business friendly to being business neutral to being downright business unfriendly. And so in that space, we need someone who can step into Salem and understand it's a hyper-partisan situation. But I really don't care what party someone is. And what we need to do is remove the supermajority, because right now there is no incentive for the supermajority to have to compromise. There's no incentive. So we must bring balance back to Oregon.
What do you think give me the top 2 mistakes of the supermajority. What are the 2 things that you think passed that needed some moderation by? Absolutely,
the corporate activity tax.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing for me is I was sitting in the airport one day, one of the vendors puts down, here's the price, corporate activity tax, here's your total. And I looked at that and I said, wow, that looks like a sales
tax. This airport, though, is it?
Yeah, this airport.
Portland Airport?
Uh-huh.
So we'll put a CAT on receipt?
Yeah, which is basically blew my mind because the reality is that's what it is. It's a different way of putting a sales tax on, right? And they put that on there. Here's your corporate activity tax. And I'm sure your restaurant doesn't do that. I'm not sure if they're allowed to.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they're allowed
But they
to.
did.
I'll
But
answer that.
which was interesting in that space because it opened up my mind. So wow, look at that. Why do we have that in here? And when you look at the sentiment of Oregon voters aren't for a sales tax, whatever you want to call it.
So you think it's a stealth sales
It
tax?
absolutely
Yeah.
is. It absolutely is because anytime the legislature's tried to pass a sales tax, you can't really get it through.
So that's a big mistake. That you don't think that would have happened with if we weren't in a supermajority situation?
Correct.
Okay. What else?
The other one is the homeless tax that is put on top of folks here in terms
You
of
mean the homeless services?
yeah, that tax.
The Metro.
Yep. You've got a lot of folks. I've got one person who donated a small amount of money to me at the very beginning. So I call on my donors. I don't have a lot of them. I call on my donors directly and I say, hey, this is great. I don't know you. What's going on? And she went on to tell me about her story where she's been a Democrat her whole life. She's a third generation Oregonian. Her business, because she got it from her family, is they have just a collection of multifamily homes. That's what they do. And then this tax came on top, let alone the fact that everything to do with having to try get someone out of your property if you have to, or if you need to invest in your property and you have to raise a rent and only raise it so far. So she said, I'm just done. She said, so I've sold my properties, which has contributed to part of the housing challenge. I mean, the housing crisis we have in Oregon is horrendous.
So what's your solution to the housing crisis? Like, let's really talk
It's-
policies here.
Absolutely. So there's multiple things to look at, solutions to a housing crisis. One is, it is extremely difficult to get permits to
So let me
build
hear it.
housing.
So what are you going to do?
I think we need to streamline that process. We need
How
to-
would the state do that?
Well, the state needs to get in and put together a commission. If we are really serious about housing, it's a supply and demand issue. We need to increase the supply.
So what would a state
One way to
commission do?
increase the supply is you take a look at what it takes to actually approve or deny a permit application without delay. What does it take?
That's all local? What would a state
A
commission do?
state commission can go in and look across the localities. What is happening? Why is it taking so long to do this? If we are truly in a crisis, because that's what we're being told, and it is true, we are in a housing crisis. We don't have enough units for the number of people that need housing. We need to accelerate that. One way to do that is shorten the amount of time it takes, not necessarily shorten the rigor, shorten the amount of time it takes to get in there. The second thing is we have plenty of contractors who are absolutely willing to be in that space, be in that business.
The
And
business
so-
of low-income housing?
of any housing whatsoever. Start building housing. Because if you supply more housing units for high-income housing, then you're going to have open spots for people who need to rent it or they need to do something, and the demand for that high-income housing will be gone, so they'll have to lower their rents, and then other people will jump into that. It's a multi-pronged approach, is what I'm saying.
Daniel, can you jump in on this? You can address housing, or we can do your top two.
Sure, I guess
Your
it's
choice.
on top of housing, I think certainly I agree. It's really a supply and demand issue, right? And also, it's also an issue with how we are able to issue permits, but it also has a lot to do with how we define which land is available for building. We've already taken measures to actually increase the density of our existing land supply that we have to build houses. We've done that, but it's not the only thing we need to do. We also need to be looking at this artificial boundary we have, the urban growth boundary, right? Those are things we've got to take a hard look at to see, this boundary, is it really constricting us on where we can build?
So you're for expanding the urban growth boundary?
I'd like to discuss it. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about that, and I want to be able to understand. There's been a lot of work around that, but that's something we've got to keep all the options on the table.
Would you want to discuss it, or what would you say in those discussions?
I would say, hey, if we're making the determination, why can't this be part of the urban growth boundary? Is it because it's reserved for farmland? Is it reserved for natural resources? I want to understand the reason why particular swaths of land are being set aside when there's nothing happening on that property. Hasn't happened. I see there's land that was set aside for particular use, for farm use, for example, but it just doesn't make economic sense for somebody to grow wheat or to grow apples or something like that. So those are things we've got to take a hard look at and see what are our needs now and what's the reality of that land being used for what it's zoned for.
So you both are in the camp of the housing crisis is caused by lack of lack of housing.
There's
and
many
housing
causes, but yeah,
affordability.
yeah.
It's been a growing trend ever since I've even been here.
Yeah, I
When-
happen to agree. There's a sightline.
Developers would tell you this 10,
Yeah.
15 years ago, we're going to have a housing crisis.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think? What role do you think mental illness and drug addiction plays?
So the combined is behavioral health,
Yeah.
right? And it's a tremendous issue, particularly, it's being fueled by two big things right now. One is the removal or the legalization of many types of
Measure
drugs.
110.
Yeah, there you go.
Where are you
Don't know
both
the
on
measures.
Measure 110?
I think it needs to be
Redone.
pull back, at least redone. And I do have I am very sympathetic to individuals having a small infraction and finding themselves suddenly off in jail. I think that has to be addressed. There's no question about it. But it's fueling a problem we've had.
Well, okay, so how would you change Measure 110?
I think with Measure 110, what needs to happen, and I don't know it deeply in this space, but I know it's flawed, is we really need to go back and take a look at what did it change, and what do we not have that's helping to catch those folks who now have, there's no disincentive to be on drugs. There's nothing there. And if you are on drugs, the services available to wrap around someone to help them, it's really not there. And what we have there is inadequate. I know this from exactly what's happened with foster kids, what's happened in mental health, where even with the hospitals, there was actually an article in today's Willamette Week about the hospitals. And there's not enough beds from a state perspective, so they're leaving them in the private hospital. I think the state's being sued. I mean, it's a similar situation, but getting back along this, when you compare us to the other states, and this is something I bring to this, having lived in 6 other states, I'm very concerned about how Oregon compares across the nation. Because our kids, my son has decided, he graduated college, he's not coming back to Oregon. And I'm not alone. And we have people who are leaving the state. But from a children perspective, we have to look at Oregon. So the reason why I say that is, when you look at the prevalence of mental health in Oregon relative to all 50 states, for
I know.
at least the 5 to 10 years, we are 50 out of 50 consistently. So at least we're consistently the worst in the country. But the reason why I bring that up is we have had one-party control of all executive offices and both sides of the legislature for 16 years, with the exception of a 2-year period when there was co-speakers of the House, which people will tell you, at that point in time, we had actually a fairly productive legislative session.
I'm just not seeing any great ideas from the other side.
I would beg to
an
differ.
idea.
I think that for you to blame all this squarely on having one party rule, I think those are separate issues. To getting back to the issue about Measure 110,
Sure.
when that measure passed, it was overwhelming support. We were promised that we were going to, in exchange for not ruining somebody's life for a small possession amount of drugs, that we were going to get addiction services. We haven't gotten that. Those are things where we look at. We basically the idea was that, look, if you're caught with a small amount of drugs, you have a choice. You pay a fine, or you seek the services, right? But in this case here, in the past 2 years, we've had a very, very tiny number of those actually sought the services, right? And those that said, "Hell, pay the fine." But if you don't pay the fine, there's no enforcement either. So we've got an issue with enforcement and also accountability.
So you wouldn't have voted for Measure 110 if you knew what was going to happen?
Well, we were promised, and we're all promised something very different from what's happening right now.
Okay, so knowing what happened, would you have voted for Measure 110 at the time, given where we are now?
Well, given where we're right now, looking at the way that the law is written right now, what we lacked is that enforcement piece and that accountability piece. And so, if there is an opportunity to think about how do we further tweak this and make this better legislation, then that would be something we should talk
Okay, so
about.
what would the accountability and enforcement piece be that you would add to Measure 110?
Well, first of all, I mean, you're basically given that choice, right? You seek treatment, or you pay a fine. But if you don't pay the fine, there's got to be some mechanism for us to be able to make it to disincentivize, right? Because what's happening is that the person that is coming from out of state here, they already know that we simply don't have the enforcement ability to hold people accountable for that. So that's something that we've got to take a serious look at. So, if we're going to allow this to happen, we've also got to have that mechanism.
Is that a middle ground between what was and what is? You're getting some forgiveness and leeway to people for minor offenses, but you need you got a carrot. There's a stick. I guess you're saying the stick needs to be bigger.
I think it's so.
So how
I
do we
think
make
so.
the stick bigger?
Yeah, I'm just unclear what would.
Well, I mean, when we say that, hey, your choices is that you seek treatment, or if you don't pay the fine. If you don't pay the fine, you could be put in jail for 364 days. That's the way it's written, right? But no one's been put in jail because they didn't pay the fine. That has to be that's the way it's supposed to be. But
So we should be putting these people in jail.
not necessarily, at least the threat of it, but they know right now if they don't pay it, nothing's going to happen. It's like you don't pay, if you don't, for example, you have a parking ticket, you don't.
Give the Clackamas. Give the Clackamas County DA a letter reading.
Say again?
The Clackamas County DA. Give them a letter reading.
You're going deep here.
Yeah, I haven't, I'll be honest, I
Clackamas
haven't been following exactly what the Clackamas County DA is.
Well, okay. So I mean, what from the criminal justice side of this? Like, how do you think, like in your community, how do you think it's doing? Like, it sounds like you want more enforcement of the existing laws.
I do.
Do you think that extends to
more
other crimes in
enforcement laws,
general?
but also support for public safety. I think that at the
Okay.
doors, the top two things that I come across, whether I'm in Lake Oswego, whether I'm in Southwest Portland, whether it's in the South Waterfront, top two things are homelessness and public safety.
So, like, who do you think is responsible? Like, where do you think the system is falling apart that you're not seeing, the investments in public safety that you want to see?
Well, I think you're looking at, with regards to this Measure 110 has a lot to do with it, but we also think about too those, equipping the officers. What we've seen in our own communities too, and I would say that our city of Lake Oswego, we're very proud to be able to have a functioning police force and a public safety system that works. And I think that one of the things we've been proud about doing on city council is that recognizing that that as police officers, we're asking police officers to do many different things that are more than just law enforcement. We're asking people to become mental health counselors, right? And what we've been able to do is actually hire a behavioral health specialist to be able to actually intervene when it's appropriate. So we are able to get people services, mental health services.
So you're saying the LO system, you think the system like yours is actually working well?
I think so. If you look
like
at our
to see
survey,
that
if you look
expanded.
at, we had a very deep dive. We did a community dialogue. We had a public outreach, and people came and they were able to share openly and also submit written responses. And we had a chance for City Council to hear the report back from our community and the direct dialogue with the police force. And we also hired a facilitator to help make sure hired a facilitator to ensure that we had that mechanism so we could get the feedback, because we really want to know how are we doing. And the overwhelming response was yes, City of Lake Oswego Police is doing a good job with regards to public safety and the police force. And I think that that's something that that's what the citizens have said. This is what the survey results, and certainly us as City Council too. We were very much all ears, listening very carefully to see what our community was saying to us.
Do you agree?
So on one thing, I'll be clear. I did not vote for 110, and I would not vote for it again, to be clear. Everything Mr. Nguyen said about it is correct in terms of what's not happening, what was promised. But even from the outset, I did not vote for it. And
What did you see?
Yeah, how did you know?
What did you see that none of the rest of us did?
It was just having outside eyes and understanding what hasn't happened in the time prior, where everything is great promise. They seem like great words. They're packaged wonderfully, put in, but there's no accountability and no responsibility. And half the time, no funding to go behind it. And so that's a persistent problem here that needs to get fixed and isn't going to get fixed if we keep things the way they are today. It's what's that definition of insanity? Keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results? You got to change it somehow, right? And so when it comes down to Lake Oswego, ever since I've been there, the police force and the public safety organization has been amazing. And I'm always a relative individual. I always think relative to what? And by and large, it's stunning, that organization. There have been challenges. There always will be challenges. Welcome to life. But what's happened and how things have progressed has been also fantastic. Where we've been challenged in Lake Oswego, the system is being overwhelmed because Portland, Multnomah County, is not doing the same steps. And so when we talk about property crimes and we talk about things that are bleeding over, they're coming over, not just into Portland, they're going into other districts as well. And so we see that and then they zoom back into Portland. And so when I look at the legislature, and you talk about, well, can you do that as a legislature? Can you go into a municipality? You can look across municipalities, you can look across county lines and say, you don't have the right to interpret whether you should or should not hold people accountable for minor infractions, right? This is the law. You must do this, and if you're not capable of doing it, then let's do an investigation. Because one community chooses to not enforce, the other community decides to put and allocate resources to it, they're impacted by it. Because homelessness, crime, things like that, they don't follow county lines, they don't follow city lines. It's a statewide issue. And we need to force the dialogue. There needs to be a wake-up call in Salem. And that's why bringing creative solutions and accountability, responsibility to bear is most important. If a bill comes to the floor and I'm there, I don't care if Republicans put forward, Democrats or anybody else does. If it doesn't have appropriate accountability and responsibility baked into it and funding, if there's supposed to be funding promised, what are we not going to fund in order to fund this, right? I just won't vote for it, period. It's a bad bill.
Is there anything?
So
you would
yes,
be
we
willing
agree
to-
on the Lake Oswego.
Would you ever vote for a tax increase?
Absolutely. Why would I not? What I
You
won't
talked
vote
about
for-
the two biggest things you didn't like were both tax increases, so I'm just
Well,
wondering.
they happen to have been tax increases, and there were other components to it. My concern is more about spending my money wisely.
Okay.
And we're just not doing that. We keep wanting to throw money at a solution, at a problem. That doesn't
And
solve the
110 is
solution.
sort of the poster child for that?
No, it's
Or-
just one of many that you can put on top of this. And everyone's got their challenges and their concerns. And what we're not getting is we're not getting dialogue. We're not crowdsourcing solutions. We're not bringing the smart people to the table. We're coming up with political solutions to real world challenges that aren't delivering results. And I say that because I'm not alone. The number of people in Southwest Portland, when I'm walking Southwest Portland, that when they realize I'm a Republican are like, damn, you might be the first Republican I ever vote for, because I'm just tired of this, and it's not changing.
This is a gimmick. This is a little gimmicky, excuse me, but I picked this up from one of the guys who worked here longer.
Sorry, I
Oh
don't
no, well, she's
looking at both of us.
Sorry. If you had to give Governor Brown a letter grade, what would you give her? Let's start with you, Daniel.
Gosh. Well, I'd say pass.
Wait, it's pass fail?
It's pass fail.
Oh, okay, I didn't know. You know what? I didn't say that was off the table, so.
It's credit, no credit.
And that's
here,
fair. And
how we
it's-
call it.
It's an unfair question for my opponent because he's been endorsed by her. And,
Yeah, fair
and that's
enough.
an unfair, in all honesty, and I fear that. For me, I will follow the voters, and the voters give her an F.
Do they really?
She's the least popular governor in the
I
nation.
know. Well, yes.
So if she's the least popular out of 50, it's got to be an F.
But how do you explain that with the fact that Oregon came through the pandemic pretty well compared to other states?
I think it did.
Infection rates,
yeah.
and things like that. I mean, look, everybody has
Except for
their blunders.
education, right?
Well, yeah, that's-
So which is abysmal. We've been, and not just us.
You mean
many-
abysmal during the pandemic or abysmal in general?
Well, we've had our challenges
Yeah.
long before the pandemic,
Yeah.
and it's again having my 4
Do you have
kids.
kids in public school?
I do now. Yeah, I'm a middle schooler now.
Oh yeah.
It's in public school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but my 4, having always been in public school and gone through it myself.
We'll leave aside the fact that you had 4 children. I have 2, and that was enough.
Well,
You look pretty good.
well.
Yeah. Good work.
That's a side story. We could absolutely have that conversation. We came through the pandemic, I think, relatively okay in some things, not in others. In that space, what I will say is, by and large, which is why my wife and I, after being in 6 states, got here.
Why were you in 6 states? Just your
Moving,
job?
work, opportunity, and we.
Remind me. I read on your bio. But what do you do?
I have a consulting firm right now, so I'm in performance consulting. So with organizations, we go in and we help with leadership and management development,
Okay.
with delivering results.
Were you ever at a bigger firm?
Oh, I used to work for GE, Johnson & Johnson.
So Six Sigma?
Large companies, completely steeped in
Okay,
Six Sigma
yeah.
lean,
Yeah.
but also management effectiveness and
Sorry,
change
just-
management and
This is coming back to me.
things like that. There's a lot of experiences I have
Okay.
there, and I've worked globally as well. I spent a lot of time overseas traveling for business.
Okay, so that's where you got the six
Multiple
state.
continents,
Okay.
Asia, South America, Europe.
You weren't on the run from the law.
Well, if I am, then
Just kidding. Go on.
But the reason why I bring that up is this, we are staying in Oregon. I have never found nicer people. I mean, by and large, folks, if you get them in a nonpartisan situation, as mentioned on City Council, at least in our community, actually, I could say in many communities it's not the case because I'm aware of a few that are just like this. But by and large, anyone on the street here, anywhere, they're nice people. They have
Like Minnesota nice?
perspectives. Like Minnesota nice. I think Oregon falls in that category. Very welcoming, very warm, very hospitable. Really interested to make sure that are we doing the right thing? And I think that's where the folks that I've run into are just they're realizing we've lost some of that from a political perspective. And it's really sitting hard with them. But I credit that to a lot of what happened here from a COVID perspective. I credit that more than I credit what our government did.
Tanner, do you think the business environment's broken?
Certainly can be improved, but I think from my standpoint, as you know, I'm a business owner. So several businesses. I've got businesses in Oregon, Washington, and California as well. And my businesses in Washington were opened up during the very early stages of the pandemic. I've also opened up 3 businesses in California during 2021 also. So when I think about that too, it's like, yes, there are always improvements to be made, but I think that those are also times where we have to be thinking about, why would I want to stay in Oregon, right? And I think that's something where I feel like I've lived in Washington and Oregon my entire life. I was born in Vancouver. If it wasn't for the river, we'd be all one state, right? So I've been living in this area through the good times, but this is certainly those bad times, right? And people ask, why do you even continue to do business? Why don't you just move across the river to Washington State? And my answer is, look, this is when we need to stick to the most. I'm not a fair weather Oregonian. I'm not when the going's good, then I am here, and then when things go south, I leave. This is when people need us the most, and this is why I think that for me, in my stage of my family, stage with my business, it's a busy time, But I think right now all hands need to be on deck, and I'm not a career politician. If you know anything about my background, I am in the business of serving noodles. I tell people I serve
Good noodles.
I serve noodles for
Really good noodles.
But that also
What's the restaurant?
it's called Bambuza.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm sorry.
And so that's my business, and that's something that my parents have always had. It was, we've always been in the food service, but one of the things that really taught me is that things don't always go your way. We started out at farmers markets and food stands, right? Outdoors. You can have the best setup, you can have everything all prepared, but if it rains, all your planning goes out the door. You can't just come back next week because the event's over. So those are things you just have to be able to adapt and figure out, how do we I can just pack up here and just move on to the next weekend and see, hopefully next weekend will be better, right? But those are those things that I think that just, it would tell me that resiliency, to understand that that things don't always happen, right? And the easy thing is that forget it, pack up shop, I'm going to get out of this business altogether, which I've tried to do many times. I tried to get out of the restaurant business when I did my MBA. Both my wife and I did our MBAs at Merrillhurst, site of Christie Care.
You're religious still to this day. Yeah.
So I know the campus well, but that was something where we felt like we've got to be able to think about a better way to earn a living for our family, to raise our family. But while we were there, we also discovered that there were things that we were doing that was quite special, right? We were creating opportunities for so many people. We were creating jobs. We were creating just in introducing people to a part of our culture that I think that when we think about food, it's just one of those common languages that you're able to sit down with somebody, break bread, and then have a conversation. And maybe we can find our commonalities there. But again, I think about the business environment here. It takes somebody that's in business to understand what the business environment is like.
Oh my God,
right?
yeah.
So we can say, hey, we want to encourage business to come in here. But if you haven't been in business, you haven't been to figure out how do you file Argo's organization? How do you start an LLC? How do you work with the city of Portland to get a liquor license? Right? Those are all things that I do.
Yeah.
It's because, and I can speak from experience. What are things we're doing better? Right? I just opened up a grocery store in Clackamas County, and going through their permitting process, right, is very different from
What kind of grocery?
It's an Asian grocery store.
What's the brand?
It's called Hip Hung Market. It's an Asian grocery store.
It's not. There's not one of those on Belmont, is there?
No,
That's something different.
That's H Mart. That's
H.
Korean.
We love that place.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But Hip Hung Market is actually it's the name of my grandfather's grocery store.
So this is your standalone. This is your first.
This is our first,
Wow.
yeah. But it's also the name of my
All right, I'm
grandfather.
feeling lazy around both of you now. So
No.
I tried to get out of journalism once, and they sucked me back in. But anyway.
No, it was one of those projects during the pandemic too, where we had to think about how do we reinvent ourselves? How do we pivot? How do we learn? Because certainly there was a period in my company where it was April, May, June, where we were completely shut down. Portland Airport, SeaTac Airport, we had days when there was only 200 people flying out for the entire airport. That's less than a plane load of.
Well, and you had to close your Lake Oswego location.
We closed our Lake Oswego location, and we also closed our Produce location too. So I've been through what I know what it feels like, And so when somebody tries to tell me, "Hey, we're supporting small business,"
Yeah.
I know what it feels like, and I can give you an honest opinion on that versus trying to sit behind a Zoom screen and say, we think this is going to be this is going to help you.
So what should the state have done differently to help small businesses during the pandemic?
Say it one time.
If the state could have done one thing different to help small businesses during the pandemic.
Well, I think that the outreach, was all very much focused on those that had access to technology. When you have applications that are submitted electronically, and there's a tight time window, and if you're not the first one on there to log in and get your application and click submit, and there were instances where grant applications closed within an hour and a half of being live. And those are things where if I'm a noodle shop owner and I'm busy trying to hold on and try to be able to work in the stores and try to pack to-go orders, at the same time, 5 o'clock is when the application period opens, and you expect me to drop everything, go online, submit all of my taxes and everything on there in a short amount of time, and then hopefully that I haven't already been excluded because they've got a maximum number of applications, right? Those are things where we miss the mark sometimes for our communities of color, for example. A lot of the small businesses are owned by the BIPOC community, and so after that we've also realized that there are different groups. For example, the Filipino American Chamber of Commerce, for example, they did a tremendous outreach. They were able to reach out to not just the Filipino American community, but also other communities where English is a second language, and they provided specific applications so you're not trying to fight. It wasn't a race on who could get there fastest. It was really looking at who needed it the most. And so those are some things.
But that wasn't the case. It wasn't how they did it.
For in the early on in the pandemic, it was who had the access to technology,
Who hit the button.
who could hit the button fastest, who had access to the CPA that was able to turn these reports out on a dime and actually get them uploaded.
And that's coming from someone who even has multiple outlets. So you weren't even a single shop. You had multiple. So you could see across that. I can tell you from an OMSI perspective, because I was board chair. I mean, just like you, it's like the air was sucked out of everything. And we were a museum.
Oh yeah.
We're not profit. The air was sucked out. And due to the size of OMSI and certainly the amazing team that continues to lead OMSI to this day, the first thing we did was, of course, make sure our folks were safe. The second thing we did is we realized no one was going to help us figure out how to open. So what can we do to at least keep operating and opening? And this is where the creative thinking comes into play. And what was fantastic was OMSI had figured out how to fill a need at the state level, because we needed first responders to be able to have a place to put their kids, because they couldn't leave them at home. And so OMSI opened up because of our designation of being an educational institution and because of how creative OMSI is, how to put the right protocols in place with all the spraying of the hands, the distancing and
Oh,
such.
yeah.
So we became one of those drop-off locations, and that's how we got to open partially very quickly, and then the use of technology. I mean, what I would have done differently from a state perspective is said, yes, we need to keep our citizens safe because of this pandemic, and we need to keep our businesses open in some way possible. And let's engage the business community. Let's engage, and it is, and he's completely correct. It's not just the business community. There's also, folks who are disadvantaged, whether it's, from English as a second language, and they have their store shops, or whether it's other types of groups. You just have to have this perspective that we also need to be in and help. And this is one of the things where the state just doesn't have people in it who think this way. And if they do, they're not being heard. And so, there was amazing. We had one restaurant in Lake Oswego. I mean, it was amazing. Tavern on Cruise figured out how to get takeout to people, and that's one that's not conducive to takeout. And at the same time, for every meal that was purchased for takeout, the owners were amazing. They were giving meals away to people who needed meals.
Wow.
Just to keep their own people in business. I mean, it's a stunning story, and it's the creativity, which is great. That's what makes this country amazing. But there was no help from the government or any leeway in terms of, yes, we also need to keep business owners going because that's what keeps employees going. That's what keeps commerce moving. That's what keeps the distribution channels going. I mean, and it just wasn't there. It was nothing. Stop.
Yeah.
Right? And those are the things we need are individuals to be able to push back on that.
Yeah. All right.
One of the things I would
Should
say-
we do fun question?
yeah,
and
we're
then do you want
running
a
out of time.
I was
quick
just gonna
ad
say-
and then?
I was just saying one of the things that I'm looking forward to going into the legislatures, we've got an opportunity, right? Whoever wins, right? An opportunity to have a clean slate. We've got over a third of the legislators will be coming in will be new. We'll have a new governor. We'll have new leadership in both the House and Senate. And so those are things where I think there's a chance for us to be able to do some good
Interesting
work,
point.
right? And those
Yeah.
are things where I feel like it's not going to be status quo. I think this is our chance to be able to say, we're going to come out, we're going to bring everything we've got to it. And I think that's something where, if you look at the makeup of all the candidates coming in, we're not all career politicians, right? Those are things that I think that you can be assured that we're going to have a very unique, a very different makeup of what we had before. So I hope that that whatever happens, that we don't lose sight of that creativity that we need to bring, because I think one of the things that that we also recognize, again, one last thing I was going to say is that during the pandemic, there were so many things going on, happening so fast. But one of the things that I'm proud that we were able to do, in my little community was, I serve on the board for Immigration Counseling Services, but I also am a business owner. But we also work with OHSU. So when we had the wildfires down south in Medford in Phoenix, when there was these entire populations of community people that were a lot of them were migrant workers, and they had lost everything in the fire. They didn't. Some areas of the state were able to get out in time, and they were able to at least have some temporary housing. There are other things that basically they could not get out. Literally, you could see cars burned to the frames, meaning they couldn't get out. They've got people that basically were coming up and saying they're too afraid to be able to go and ask for services because a lot of them were undocumented. And so it put them at risk. And so what we were able to do with Immigration Counseling Service, with the help of OHSU, with our company, we're able to say, hey, this isn't government sanctioned, but there's a need. So we were able to take a group of us, drive a truck, the Bambusa truck, filled to the insides with all the donations from OHSU people that work there, diapers, hygiene supplies. Adidas came with a van load of Adidas shoes, and we were able to set up an impromptu a triage to basically say people were able to line up with people that look like them, to understand their needs as members of the Immigration Counseling Service, and say, what do you need? We need access to be able to redo our green cards, our Social Security cards. We'll take care of that. Meanwhile, do you need access to mental health triage? OHSU was able to provide that triage. They brought their van down there, and then we're able to have our people just distribute just the basic necessities outside of really a government sanctioned or something was organized by the state, because we had to react quickly. And in that short amount of time, we were able to serve over 500 families
Wow.
and provide them with
Okay.
that critical.
Yeah.
That's the creativity that we need, and that's
Got
what
it.
I'm hoping that we're able to bring as a new batch of
Okay.
leaders.
Okay, so we have one final
Fun,
question.
fun questions.
This is fun or not? Okay, so the world is ending tomorrow. What is
Real
the
fun.
one food that you want to eat? You first.
There's too many foods. I grew up in a household that didn't have good cuisine.
You're
So
British, right?
Yeah, and so I would find myself at all my friends. I had 4 Thanksgivings: Portuguese, Italian, Chinese. And then I'd come home for
God, love
Thanksgiving.
it.
So for me, the challenge. I mean,
All right,
what's
so it's not going to be
it's
bangers and mash.
No. Although I got to tell you that I do actually like bangers and mash.
Oh,
that wouldn't be a bad idea.
But I think if it's one food, I mean, I love cioppino. I love cioppino.
Interesting.
What is the name?
Cioppino.
Yeah.
It's Italian seafood stew.
Yeah.
My wife,
Especially
we make
here-
it. My wife makes it. I'm half Sicilian. She's half Italian.
Well, my wife is half Italian. I've got it. Her grandmother. So my children had, because my parents have passed. They only had one American grandparent. So we grew up in a house. 3
Your parents were British.
British. Her mother's Italian. Sister-in-law's French.
Where in Italy?
You know,
Where in Italy?
Genoa. Right. So we just. I mean,
Yeah, there you go.
In the East Coast, myself, and of course it just was natural.
Yeah.
But cioppino, especially
I
now
think-
with the weather.
Right. So I think I know your answer, but
Well, I think you know my answer.
Well,
Yeah, I kind of want to hear it.
Wow, that's pretty close.
no, your answer. What did I say? What did I
I
say?
didn't realize you got through.
No. I said I think I can get maybe I have an idea what your answer will be. Go on.
Okay, the world's ending tomorrow, so I don't have to worry about high cholesterol.
No.
Pressure. Okay, that opens up the door. So all the things that I love to eat but I shouldn't eat, the fattiest brisket.
Ooh.
I love brisket, and I love the high cholesterol seafoods. So that would be if
Brisket.
Brisket.
I like both your choices.
I was gonna say, there's no way you guessed brisket.
No, there's no way I guessed brisket.
What were
No way I
you
guessed- I thought you were going to say something from your restaurant.
Oh no! If it was again,
But you're too modest for that.
But you said it was if the world's ending tomorrow, and although my dietary decisions are based upon what is
no, it's
tomorrow,
good
right?
answer.
So
Yeah. Those are
I
good
like
ones.
both of these, yeah.
Yeah, I like both those a lot.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely,
I
thank you.
appreciate you.
Nobody
coming in
said
and
like
letting
kale
us know
salad.
you.
Nobody said kale salad so far.
Would anybody?
Maybe my wife.
That's the last meal you can have. I don't know. You might be surprised at what some folks.
No,
think
I'd be
for.
like, yeah, I want like fried chicken on mashed potatoes with, covered in Skittles. Something like that.